Hey y'all, it's Robert back with my Stewmac LP kit build. If you guys remember right or watch the other videos, I did a lot of work on this last week because I got some time. I'm not a video guy, so I didn't record a lot of it. I still got to get used to that. So I'm just kind of doubling back. The last video I did, we did the head. Talked about me cutting the head and setting the neck into the body. So this time I want to talk about the finishing, sanding, and all that stuff that I've done. The instructions are pretty thorough. They've got it broke down here on painting on day 1, day 2, day 3, all that stuff. The preparations are really good. Videos are really good. But there's a few things that I did different. So they start by saying start with 220, sand down the body and sand everything down. I did that. Then it says go to 320. I did that as well. Couple things I noticed while I was sanding. So I did use a sanding block, definitely good. Always when you're dealing with flat surfaces. So on the back of the head, the face of the head, and the back of the guitar here, I've got my sanding block that I used 320 with. It does say to use P series sandpaper. This is the sandpaper I used here. I went and bought a bunch of sandpaper. I needed it anyway for my business. But I went and bought some more for this. And little did I know, I bought P series, which is great. They said that the P series sandpaper has a more consistent grit to give you a little bit better finish. So I got lucky there. But a couple things that I noticed, you can't use the sanding block on the sides here because it's just a flat block. So to get down inside those grooves, coming around, especially here and around this corner here, you're not going to get a good sand on there. So what I did is I just took my sandpaper, I doubled it over once and then a second time, and that gives me a little bit stiffer of a sandpaper, but it's flexible enough to where it'll go down inside of these grooves as I'm going through these grooves, but it's stiff enough to where I can still get the nice flat surface here, and I don't have to worry about any waves in the side of this thing. So that's what I used in order to get the sides down. And then they routered the edges here. Really good routering all the way around, and I didn't want to get any flat edges from going through here and sanding around because you're always going to get flat edges if you do that way. So what I did is I took another piece of sandpaper, I cut it down to where I only fold it once. So now it gives me a little bit more flexibility, but it's stiff enough to keep that nice good radius without kinking. So with that, I was able to lay it down on the edge. I put my finger on either side of that radius without coming off of it too far. Just put my fingers down on either side of that radius, and that's what I would work that edge with really good. Once I did the back and the side, I'd come back and take any kind of corner off that the sanding block would give me, and I got that good radius and I maintained that good radius. Of course, I did the neck by hand down inside of here to get down inside these little corners and edges around the neck here. I folded it up, or I'd take the one that I folded in half and I'd crease it really, really tight. And that really allows me to get down inside this groove and just kind of work that edge a little bit and then pull it away with the grain. You want to pull it with the grain, don't sand across the grain. One mistake I almost made, I almost got myself pretty good on this one. Almost got to the point of no return is, even though I read the instructions, of course we get excited, we're doing the work on it finally. I forget a few things. It said do not use the coarser grains on the face, on the veneer, on the face or the headstock. Because this veneer is super, super thin. When I say it's paper thin, man, I ain't joking. It is thin. Excuse me. So I wasn't paying attention. I hit it with 220. I did the front by hand. I didn't use the block because I can keep the contour there and not get any flat spots. So I did it by hand and just let my hand follow that contour as I was going with the grain. I hit it with 320. I hit the headstock up here with the with the sanding block, hit it with 220. Then I came about halfway through 320. I realized what I was doing. I was like, oh. So I stopped there. I just kind of feathered out. I had to get those 220 scratches out with the 320, but at that point, I just went super, super light and minimalized the use of that heavier grit as much as I can. Now, another place that I went a little bit different, I didn't blow through anything, by the way, on the veneer top, so that's great. I didn't get too far. I think one of the things I had in my head is I really needed to work these edges, because there were some really rough edges in the wood grain right up against the trim on this point here. Down here on this side here, there were some rough edges, primarily here though. And then the trim was actually higher than the veneer on this front leading edge on this side. So that's why I had it in my head that I needed to sand the top. But I was able to finish that out and really blend everything and smooth everything out, and get a nice, good, smooth edge right there without blowing through it. So I was lucky there. But where I went different is the instructions say go to 320, and then from there, you know, do your wood grain fillers and stuff. I do a lot of woodwork already. You can guess the type of work that I do here in my business. I never use lacquers. I don't. For this type of work, I use usually linseed oils and waxes. This one's been linseed oiled. And this has got no stain on it at all. This is the linseed oil on top of walnut. Quite a few coats of linseed oil in order to get this dark, but I keep more of a natural look to the wood this way. And I get a super, super smooth surface by using a finer grit. So I actually continued on. I used a 400 grit on the guitar, and then I went to a 600 grit on the guitar. So I sanded it down all the way to 600 grit. Now the 600 grit, I did go back and finish the veneer tops, but everything is really, really, really super smooth. Another thing that I might benefit from that, and I made a decision on that I'm going to differ from the instructions a little bit, is the next step after sanding this would be to add the wood grain filler. So let me get the wood grain filler. Sorry, I've got it set to the side. So Stewmac sends, of course I ordered the Sunburst kit, complete with all of the lacquers, the vinyl sealer, and the wood grain. So this is the wood grain they give you. It comes in a bag, you mix it up with water, and then you, at this point, what you would do is use a flat edge, a credit card, or something like that. You'd mix that up into kind of a paste, a thin paste, where it's not too runny, but it's still going to be able to be manageable. And you put it on here and you wipe it back off with that card, and it really pushes it down into the grain. You can see the grain here, although my grain isn't really that deep. If you can see all of that, kind of that wood grain, my grain is not really that deep because I took it all the way down to 600. Now it's still going to be there. I'm not lying. I'm still going to be there. It's still going to be there. But even Stewmac stated that a lot of guitar manufacturers are actually bypassing the grain filler step. And they even mentioned both in the book and on the videos that even Gibson themselves is skipping that step altogether now. How they're getting rid of that grain and getting that grain down, I would imagine they're sanding it a little bit finer rather than just stopping at that heavy grain at 320, because it's still a pretty moderate to heavy grit, 320. So I did not use the grain filler. I've never used grain filler before. I don't use it on the wood that I already do work on. I am going to experiment with it down the line, so I may use it on further guitar builds because I have a plan already for additional guitar builds. But I decided not to use it on this one. So there's where I went different. So I sanded everything down. Let's see. Another thing that I did different is I did not use the cap here, the neck cap. So it's got a little piece of plastic of the same cream color that your pickguard and everything would be, that you're supposed to super glue down here and then file the edges and blend it. But I'm worried about my finish transition, so I don't want a good black here, a different black, and black here, since since the lacquer would be different on a different surface, wood versus plastic. So I kept it this way here. So I had to make sure I really got in and got this area too. I had a tendency to forget it, and then, oh yeah, I've got to go back. So don't forget this. And then you're going to want to go sideways when you do this. You got to go with the grain, right? So I've got everything sanded down to 600 grit. I've got the neck glued in. I've got everything done and finished that way. So the next step would be to hang it and spray it. So I talked about in another video that we made, I've already drilled the holes for the strap connections. I did that with a small drill bit, the size of the screw for the strap peg. And then I used a smaller screw here in order to go into that hole so that I can hang it from upside down while I'm doing this. So I've got that done and prepped. And then yesterday I sprayed it with the vinyl sealer that comes with the kit. So it does come with 1 can of vinyl sealer. The instruction says that you spray 1 to 3 coats of aerosol vinyl sealer over the entire body and the neck, waiting 1 to 2 hours between each coat, then let dry overnight. So, and the neck part, right? So that's one part that I was kind of confused with and was having some issues with, because my ultimate plans are to ebonize my fretboard.